Hello and welcome to Share.care's What is Manly radio show and podcast. Men feel more lonely, lost, and not useful in society than ever in history. Males are not attaching to school, work, or women. What it means to be a man appears lost. Is there a framework for being manly that we can unearth?
Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Hello, Stefan. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Damian?
Very well, thank you. Very well, and it's early morning for you, and it's evening for me. You're in the primary, London, and I'm in the colony down here in Australia.
Yeah, I'm kind of up and down. We can say for
Yeah.
sure.
Exactly.
I'm sure you're having a better weather. We're having basically practically almost raining every day since end of January. It's been very, very interesting weather here in the UK for the last couple of months.
Isn't that what they say about London? Is if it's not raining, it will be soon.
Yeah, pretty much. So I come from Iceland as well, so it's not that hugely different. It's like you can have every kind of weather in 8 hours practically.
It sounds like Melbourne as well. But we've got Stefan Stefansson. Now, he's a passionate solution-orientated relationship coach focused on inspiring men to achieving fulfilling relationships, being present, and self-growth. Now, Stefan, that relates very specifically, and I know in the pre-show we were talking about this as well, that you have some specific relationship experience with this topic that we're talking about, is what is manly? Because let's start a bit in the wider scheme of things where men seem a bit lost. There's a lot of men lost today. They're not finding their way. They're feeling lonely and not like they're not contributing to society. What have you experienced from a broader perspective? What have you seen? And then we'll narrow down to some specific things that we can talk about in that.
Yeah, I feel like in the last couple of years, men have actually been in the last decade or so. Men have kind of get more and more lost in how to be manly or how to be a kind of a valued member in society. Let's put it that way, because there's always been that kind of one that's been the macho thing, one would be an aggressive thing, and one would be the use of the manly word. But for me, it's with as well what has been very positive as well with the women movement. They getting more kind of recognized and more kind of appreciated and the more kind of fighting for to be respected. I think the thing what we as men have always done to ourselves is that disrespect to women has never been a good thing for us, and a lot of men kind of take that sometimes to the extreme. And I think with then the women coming in, it's kind of gone for me a little bit too far on that section, that men are now afraid to actually, or it's not maybe the right word, afraid, but confused on what are they actually allowing to do when they're kind of she a beautiful woman, they want to come in and want to give her a compliment, and they're going to get kind of knocked down. And I think in a certain way, I'm all for equal rights and all that, but sometimes men need to be men and women need to be women, especially since you see all these rom-coms and the women are all chasing the bad guy, and they want to fix somebody and things like that. And it's kind of sends a really mixed messages, to be fair, and men I think are very confused at the moment.
Yeah, so from that perspective, it's not knowing what to do from the of how to relate to women. That's a lot of the confusion that you're seeing. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, and then as well, just being maybe going too far into accommodating. I think a lot of men have kind of started to shy away of having their own opinion when talking to women, or being a little bit afraid of expressing themselves. And I think in that, I think men need to be much more aware that their opinion is actually validated, and that they need to have opinion on things, because they want people want you to be an active member in a conversation, not somebody that is just yes man or some in that regards.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So you're saying that from what you're witnessing is a lot of men are not voicing their opinion because of the fear of how that might be taken. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, a lot of times.
Yeah. Is that so? And so, is there a lot of because I know I mean, obviously, people in quiet rooms will talk about things, but then when you're in public, then people have a different persona. So, from your experience, is there a lot of that discussion with men that you know about things where they, or probably men and women, about things that they wouldn't say in public?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that comes down to that locker room manly behavior. I think men tend to want to brag, and kind of, and a lot of the times, and they will exaggerate stuff, or they would say something that's more derogatory to women, and maybe when they're with men, that they will do to women. And that's the same in a lot of societies in general. You kind of when you think you're in a safe space, you maybe say different thing than you would be in a general conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
I think for us is just, but sometimes you need that outlet. Sometimes you need to be able to, like, men need to have the safe space to be able to talk about themselves. And I think as well for men, have never been good at sharing their feelings with other men in general. So if a man is going through some difficulties, he generally doesn't go to another man to talk about it. So that's why you see more and more of these support groups popping up, that you're kind of creating that safe space, because you would be maybe ashamed or embarrassed to talk to some points with your best mate, or something like that, especially if you're in a healthy competition with that person.
Yeah.
And I think like a lot of people are, men are.
It's an interesting point that you raise there, that men need to be able to vent, because it's very common. Well, it's stereotypical. Let's say it's stereotypical that women will talk through their problems, so they might not have it fully fleshed out in their mind, and in that talking through, there's a lot of things that'll come out that may not be right or relevant, but they're talking it through to get to the solution. But it sounds like from that perspective, if men attempt to do that, they're concerned that they might say something, even though it hasn't been fully fleshed out, and all of a sudden someone jumps down the throat and say, how dare you say that, when it's like it's a process of working through it. Is that what you're saying, that men don't have the opportunity to do, or men are fearful of doing because they're going to get in trouble if they work through this or try and explore what that is?
I think in a lot of relationships, and I think more comes into relationships, people are not very good at communicating, especially when they feel they're being threatened, or they feel, or they're unhappy about something.
Yeah.
Because what I find in a lot of communication is, when you say something about another person, they get very offensive very quickly,
Yeah.
and they may not be listening to what is actually being said.
Yeah.
So I've had that in the past, where I'm trying to express myself, and I wasn't, or I'm still struggling to be able to express myself in the right way. Is that when you're not good at communicating, or not experienced, and women tend to be better at this, because they're just, their environments is much more about communication than the men have ever been. So what I struggled with was to put my communication, or my feelings, or my needs in a way that it wouldn't come across offensive or aggressive. And when I would start, that would have been taken out of context, and I wouldn't be able to finish to explain myself. So was as people are very, very like to say now, like that active listening part,
Yeah.
where somebody, especially when you're in a heated argument and you time to express yourself, and you maybe get only three words out, and you put the worst three words out, and then everybody jumps on those three words, and you can't explain yourself while you're trying to get out. And I think that's one of the major thing at the moment, Because it's like when the saying of when you back somebody in a corner, they will come out fighting, right?
Yeah.
And it's that element I think we need to be a little bit more conscious of, that when people are struggling with communication, especially men in general, that just there needs to be a little bit more leeway than you would maybe give like from a women in guys, if you want to give like your best friend, your best or girlfriend or something, because men tend to be much worse at starting that communication and being vulnerable as well, and especially when you have that happen to you over and over again, then nobody kind of listens to you to the end, and everybody drops off. Men tend to just retreat. They will shut down and not try, because if you don't get that support, like with anything, people generally just back out.
Yeah. That's an interesting point that you mentioned about men shutting down, because that's very common. And they talk about this I've seen this in a lot of relationship counseling, where they will talk about to the extreme of where men in a couple relationship, if men get too many knockbacks from wanting to have sex, they will shut down. I'm not saying that someone should agree to have sex all the time, but what it is when men they do have this thing where they will shut down, and it's very common in relationships where the men will constantly get knockbacks, and so they'll get knockbacks, and so they will stop trying, and this usually happens from the research that I've seen. Usually happens not long after having children, and there's all these other factors going on, and then later on in their relationship, when the children are a bit older and things like that, she's back in the mood again, but he's shut down now, and they have this real problem. There's a lot of issues around that. And this point that you're raising about shutting down is an interesting point. I hadn't considered that before, but when you look at it from the perspective of, okay, men generally are not as good as communicating. That's a stereotype, but it's there's a lot of research to support that. Women are much better at communicating. I think it's because there's research that I read where men actually get paid. Men in happy relationships get paid more than men who aren't in or who are single or are not in happy relationships. Largely, they put it down to is the men learn to actually communicate better from their partner. And because they're able to communicate better, they have a better empathy, and as a result, they're able to earn more money. But that point that you're raising about, if we're taking it from that perspective, which is widely accepted, that women are better communicators and men are trying to communicate, and if you're trying to learn something, you're going to fumble it. It doesn't matter what it is, you're going to mess it up. You're going to have to keep trying. And so, to then jump down somebody's throat and criticize them for when they're trying and wanting to make an effort, that kind of goes against the whole principle of what you're trying to achieve. It's like, well, hang on a minute, you've missaid this, and have that conversation. Do you think that's more of an approach that people should have?
Absolutely, because I think with men, there's two things with this shutting down. One is men in general are very insecure.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get knocked down specifically around sex, men are really insecure when it comes to sex. Well, in general, I'm not saying everybody, but kind of general. Because they like everybody has body issues. Everybody has some kind of mental issues. And people will hide that for a long period of time. And when you keep getting that knockdown and the knockbacks, and nobody's explaining why, and the men just, as I say, they will lock themselves back down because they don't know how to express themselves and feel if they bring it up that it's not manly, and they will and generally feel that they will be vulnerable if they do so. Because as you mentioned, one of the key thing of a happy relationship, and I think you're absolutely right, there's quite a lot of research coming out that people in a happy relationship are generally more successful and paid more because they are better at the communication. Because generally, if you're in a good relationship, it is down to both parties being able to communicate their needs. And men seems to have or do have a struggle around that in general. And it comes down to, one is obviously they have their own body issue, they have all their own vulnerabilities. And the other thing, it's sometimes as well, and it's not meant from a bad place, women will kind of voice their own insecurities as well, or like you say to your wife, "You look gorgeous today," but the wife will respond to, "Now I'm looking fat," and blah blah. And if she always keeps saying that,
Yeah, you look great today.
underneath,
What, you don't think I look great every other day?
yeah, or something like that, or
Yeah.
she's not in a good mood, or she says, I feel bloated today," or whatever it is.
Mm.
And if you if women keep saying that to a man, men will subconsciously like pick it up. It's not like it just. I think sometimes women as well need to understand when the man is actually giving them a compliment, it is actually a true compliment. It's not something that they wouldn't be wasting those words.
Agenda. He actually likes
it. Yeah, exactly. And I think I don't know if that's part of.
Is it because men are generally, I mean, there's a stereotype that men are generally lazy. It's like, if we're giving a compliment, we mean it. We're not going to go to that effort because we don't mean it.
Exactly.
It's lazy.
Exactly. And I think a lot of the times, especially what I've seen with women in relationships, sometimes they can be really bitchy. With women can like saying is like women are women's worst enemies, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of times when in women communication is that they don't trust what the other woman is saying to them because they think there's a hidden agenda. But generally, when, as you said, and I think you hit the nail on the head a little bit, men in general are lazy, right? And it comes specifically if you ever look at.
That's why I'm very efficient, because I'm really lazy. I want to find the easiest way to do it so I can get it done and move on.
Exactly. It's like
maybe sex is a little bit different, but
yeah. It's like if you look at the evolution of like the mankind, and if we go all the way back, we had the cavemen. Men will go out and kill the animal, and then come home, and the women would take over and do all the kind of prepping and all that kind of thing, and men kind of left it at that. And it kind of seems to be the same thing when men go out to look for a relationship or girlfriend or a wife. Is that they put a lot of effort into it in the beginning. A lot of effort in, and you know they take you out for dinner, they buy all the flowers, and then they romance the hell out of you, right?
Yeah.
And then when they have kind of cut the price and they're in the relationship and they're secure, and the men tend to get lazy. Yeah. They tend to turn into that couch potato.
I told you I love you.
Yeah, exactly.
I did it 20 years ago. I haven't changed.
And we as men are very bad at that. We forget that we actually have to.
No, she likes those compliments. She likes those that romance. Yeah.
And we need to put effort into the relationship. We need to be able to kind of keep that courtship going, even though we won. And that's where we as men are very bad at, is to, after we do that, we tend to get lazy. And I think that comes down to the communication as well, is that it needs to be kind of a healthy relationship in both ways, that both parties are having that open conversation and you are actually connecting constantly on just how things are and how your feelings are and how things are progressing, and not be afraid of it. And that comes back to that closing down. If a man starts to kind of, as you say, having sex or say something about he's not liking, and he's not able to communicate it or doesn't feel that he's been listened to, then he will just give up. And that's generally what men do. And I think that in a lot of relationships that fail is because of the man. It's not about that he doesn't love the person. I think as well, women will read into the situation differently. So when a man closes down, or he thinks differently, because men tend to live more in their heads than actually because of don't communicate. So a man will come home maybe, because I had this scenario actually happen to me in my previous marriage, is that there was a specific scenario I always remember. I had been out for the day. We kind of been kind of sex texting my wife, and we were kind of getting a bit horny about it. And then as I came home, she was in her slacks and looked tired. So I was in my head like, okay, she's not into sex, so I'm not going to ask her. And so we just came home and kind of did my thing. We had like easy conversation and blah blah blah. But in her mind, and I found out later, she was waiting for me to come home, rip her clothes off, and have sex on the kitchen floor. but when I came home, I didn't get that feeling, and I was just that in kind of when I looked at it, just went into my own dark place and said, "No, probably she wouldn't want me to do that." Yes. and because I was just vulnerable, and I was or just not in that space, that thinking, okay, she doesn't want it. So and then it was part of just that whole closing down part. Yeah. And I think that's very 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 interesting kind of dynamic where people kind of check out a little bit. in that
I
regard.
think part of that from this framework of, if we put a framework around, well, that's what we're looking for, is the framework for being manly. And I had this note here that, where have I got it? Do you think having a bit more patience is something that we can, because from that perspective, if we're in a situation where, you're having this, we come back to that communication you were talking about. Do you think, and if you're talking with somebody and they say something and start getting upset, rather than immediately trying to justify, do you think part of that communication we could actually, as a man, go, okay, this has been misunderstood. Let me understand what their misunderstanding is, and just give them space to let it out. And do you think we could direct, that could be something as a framework for men, is just to be, a little bit patient when that kind of thing happens, and allow that to flow through. And as they tire, it could take a while, but as they tire, and just go, okay, I hear what you're saying. Can I explain what I was actually doing in that situation, and just allow it to diffuse that way? Do you think that might work?
Absolutely. I think with a lot of things, and this comes down to communication skills. And I think this is one of the things, like, if we are never taught this at school, like communication skills are generally never taught at school, like active listening. Like now, there's a lot of talk about that particular thing, and as well, reframing. So you listen and then you reframe what they just said. You say, is this what you mean? And I find with a lot of things, and absolutely, it's about patience. It's about letting things come over you and not having to defend yourself at that exact moment, if that makes sense. And then, because what I find as well with I don't know, I feel at least in my relationship, and I don't know, kind of feel it seems to be very conscious in a lot of other relationships, is that when women start to complain about something, it's usually not about what they're complaining about. There's other things that built up to that point. That there's always like a dam burst, and so they just pick the first thing that's irritating, and then they just really hammer into that, but it actually is something else that has been bothering them. So that's, I think, it's very important with this, is, as you said, having the patience to let them like talk it out. And I think as well, when it happens, you need to be willing to do the response in a more passive or more lightly note, not like, I'm not like making it sarcastic or laughing at it or something, but more in a like jokingly way. That I think a lot of the times as well, some of these things that come from women is that they are testing you as well at the same time.
I've had a number of women say that they're not going to give us all the secrets, and they're going to keep us on our toes. There's more than
exactly. So is that they're more kind of testing you, how you respond to their insecurities, and how they blow up. Because if you say because some of it is just as well, because like in our DNA, it's about survival, right? The women want somebody that actually can stand up to them. And somebody that is actually gonna.
Number of women have said that they want you to stand up to them, not, and this is not oppressive way, but actually to voice your opinion. Exactly.
It's not about the oppressive way or dominating way in any shape or form, but not being the one that's saying like she's blaming you for something you don't feel is right, that you actually defend yourself, not that say okay. Because a lot of men will just say that, or they will just walk out of the room and, as I say, get back to that closing of the down or checking out, because they don't feel, if they do respond, or they feel they're always being screamed at, is that they just don't see the effort, because they don't feel being listened. And I find as well, a lot of the occasion is, I don't know, there's a lot of perception in and we kind of, it's been rightly kind of built up of the centuries, like men can treat women really badly, right? And so men are generally being brushed, be the bad person, or the enemy. And women tend to fall into that when they got into a relationship and something bad happened, is that he is a man, he's going to be horrible to me, and all this is going to happen. But if you're in a relationship, why would you want to go by default thinking that the person that you spent that time with building a relationship with has a hidden agenda and wants to be mean to you? I think that's as well from women. They need to little bit be more positive about the relationship they're in, and not always think about the worst.
Yeah.
Because if you always think about the worst, you expect the worst.
That's something I've seen in a number of different in the research, and also a number of different counselors talk about that you should always approach things that there's a good intention behind that. Not, I mean, I'm not talking about, we're putting aside, physical abuse and that kind of, or it doesn't have to be physical abuse, but plain out abuse. Putting that aside as a good intention, but general communication, that kind of thing. It's always, they talk about how it you should be focusing on that there's a good intention there. There might be a misunderstanding of what's gone on, and that's where it's like, well, okay, there's a good intention here. Maybe I don't understand, and have that and it comes back to what you're talking about, communication, talking it through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think as well, especially when it happens, is that, let's say something happened, or like let's say like take the default, because this happens quite a lot in society today, is that you were in a previous relationship. Let's say it was for a year or 2 years, whatever, and you are when you ended the relationship on a good note, and you still maybe know the person, and that person texts you or something, and you be nice and say, okay, hi, thanks for the message, how are you? And the other woman will take it like he's still in communication with his ex, and she will talk to all her women friends, and they yeah, that's not right, and like he's probably sleeping with her and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And all that like the castle, like in the sky comes up, and all the scenarios come up. Instead of just saying, like, going to him and say, I'm not comfortable with you still being in a conversation with your ex. Why do you feel that you still need to be there? And just get his side of it. And then maybe sometimes like men fall into the trap of wanting to be nice, right?
Yeah.
Thinking that they don't really put it into the same bucket, like this is bad that I'm still communicating with my ex that I broke up like 5 years ago, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And men wouldn't really recognize it until somebody actually points it out to them, because they are not thinking that way.
We're not that
They're
bright.
just thinking, yeah, exactly. We're not that bright. We are not actually going out and having 5 or 6 girlfriends on the side just because we can. And okay, some people will, but I'm saying in general is that we are not that bright or want to be in that complex environment.
There is those issues there. I'm just going to stop there for a moment, because we do have to end for the radio listeners. But we're on that note of men are not that bright, we're going to end for the radio listeners, and we'll continue the conversation in the podcast. So to catch the rest of this and learn more about men not being bright, tune into the podcast. But I mean, that's an interesting point that it's not just interesting, it's a very valid point that you raise. In those circumstances where that situation happened, someone's texting their ex, and I've heard that story many times, and it's just innocent, relationship breakup wasn't bad. We stayed friends. And then, you start seeing someone new, this happens, and there's still some communication going on there. And from that perspective, it does again come back to that communication, because if the girl's going off and talking with her friends about it and not raising it with a partner, well, that's an issue that they've got with that communication. I guess coming back to what we're talking about here is what is manly in the framework there, when that is actually eventually raised with the guy, eventually. How should guy deal with that? If she's getting, is it a case of, from what is manly, is that creating a place of security, of safety, saying, hey, explaining it, and if necessary, saying, look, this is what's really important here, and being able to talk that through? Or is that how would you create that from a man's perspective in that situation? What do they need to do?
I think in some men just don't realize how it affecting the other person. So I think to bring it up and just let the man know, I think is very important. And as well, ask the man, why do you feel you still need to respond to her text messages?
Yeah.
Because in general, men, we don't set out to be conniving or underhanded or anything. Like I say, we are not that bright.
Lazy. It takes more effort to be conniving than it is to be stupid.
Exactly. we are not kind of building like, okay, let's now, and because she dumped me, so I'm going to screw her over and keep her texting or just be nasty kind of thing. Or I'm texting her just because if this fails, maybe have a fallback or something like that. generally we're not that conniving. I mean, there are obviously exceptions, like in anything. We generally feel like, I think with men, it's like we sometimes are just so simple in that regard, is that we just don't really, at least I feel sometimes in my scenario, for me, and that's me kind of talking from personal experience, it was more of a, I'm a decent person, and if somebody can send me a message, I'm decently at least acknowledge their message. But then as well, the women are right, is that you can't really keep a communication going with an ex. You should be ending it, and it's not healthy either. So I think it's as well just an education sometimes for men as well. It's like, it's not normal to be in communication with an ex-girlfriend that you woke up 5 years ago. So let it go. And I think it's sometimes men just needs to be shaken up a bit as well in this thing. And it's not meant that they want to be mean, or they're conniving and doing something, because they're just clueless when it comes to this, and they just don't recognize how both how damaging it could be to the relationship, and how damaged it actually can be to themselves, especially if they're texting somebody that did actually break up with them, and they're kind of keeping them on the hook, and it's not good for them in any shape or form. And if you really want somebody back, you need to be hard to get. It's proven in any rom-com you've ever seen. It's always hard to get person.
Do you think that, I mean, from that experience as well, because I mean, you talk about men being clueless, and I can certainly attest to that. When I was young, I really had no idea, and some things I would do are just really stupid. When I look back at that and go, I just did not have that awareness. And do you think part of that, when we look at that clue, because we're talking about interaction with others here, because a lot of the times the way we do relate, as men, we'll get out there and play, and I used to jump off roofs and jump, make these big jumps from a bike and do all these kind of things, which really wasn't about interacting with people so much. And I didn't do that. I mean, we had conversations with them, but we're more busy riding our bikes. I grew up in a small country town. It was more about riding our bikes around, and we didn't really chat about stuff. We just hooned around. And do you think this cluelessness comes from this, not having that experience in relationships? And like you said, we don't intend to be doing stuff like that. And it's a case of, okay, we need to, because you said, I'm a decent person. Do we need to have that reminder for men that go, hey, I'm a decent person. I might be a little bit clueless, and I think I want to listen and learn, but we need to remind ourselves, and men need to remind themselves that they are a decent person. We just might be lacking a bit of skill in certain areas.
Absolutely. I think that's where, especially I think as men get older, we mature differently to women. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we do not communicate in any shape or form. And it's like, if you like, our outlet in our as we grow up is activities, whatever sports we're in, as you mentioned, like jumping over like whatever, and putting our lives at risk. That's just how we grew up. We like somebody. There's actually a person I've been reading recently that she has a framework around how men kind of progress, and she compares it to knight and a king and a prince. So like, if you've ever seen a knight movie, there's always in the knight, and there's always the helper, the page that walks around him and wants to be a knight. So her perception is, the page is when we are probably up to 15, 16, then the knight is from 16, 18, 17 up to like late 20s, because then it's the knight is about, we're going to go out and save the world, and we're going to save the damsel, we're going to slay the dragon, and all that kind of thing. We're still in that way of we're still looking for adventures. We still want to save that damsel in distress, and all that kind of thing. And it takes us a while to get through that phase.
Yeah.
And then we get into the prince phase, where we kind of start to settle down and see we want to be a king at some point. And that means we want to have the house, we want to have the job, we want to have the pension, all that kind of thing, and then we want to have the kids. And then when we get into the king, it's then we're much more we're now in power. We have our kingdom, and then there's another struggle that men get into in that age, and a lot of people kind of call it the middle-age crisis. I think, like, actually somebody compared to me, like, if you see an old man in a sports car, there must be a middle-age crisis. But the problem thing is, it's not that. It's
when you
more.
Can afford it.
Exactly. Then it was when he can afford it. Exactly. And the kids have moved out, and actually has all this money all of a sudden that he had never had before. And I find more as I get older. For me, it's as you get older, you've done all the traveling, you have seen all the churches, you've seen all those squares, and you've done all those activities, you've done the bungee jumping, you've done whatever you wanted to do in life. And to me, that's when I get to that when I get now to that stage of my life, it's more about the interaction with people, and I now know more about how to communicate that I didn't do when I was in my 20s. I was all just running around, getting between parties and doing something extreme activities and whatever it was to keep me interested. Yeah. And I think that and we are, like, in that time period, we don't communicate. Men in general just don't communicate. We're bad at it, and I think it's the biggest struggle as you go through men, and that's why I feel women tend to, like, young women tend to lean towards more older men, because the older men have now understood how powerful communication is.
Yeah. That doesn't mean we want to, because I look at that when you talk about communication, is because I know my relationship with my dad, I have this amazing relationship. I think it's an amazing relationship with my dad. Now, that doesn't mean we communicate all the time. We actually don't communicate that much at all. And we don't have to. That's the thing. My dad and I, we know when we've gone times where we haven't actually spoken probably for a month, not because we were upset at each other or anything, but we're just busy doing what we're doing. And then we'll catch up, and it'll be, oh yeah, and if we see each other in person, it's a big hug. We can say I love you, all that kind of thing. But we don't get into in-depth discussions about topic that just I cringe at the thought of having those conversations. But as a older man, because I'm older than I look, I'm 50, and so I recognize that doesn't work with women. They need that conversation. So I would say a lot of the times when I have I can do these shows because it's kind of a misconception that I like to talk. My favorite pastime is taking my lawnmower out to my my lawn out there. I'm at the beach house here. Taking my lawnmower out, I've got a self-propelled lawnmower, and going up and down and being Forrest Gump with no one disturbing me. That's my favorite time.
Exactly.
But I understand with women, they need that conversation. So a lot of times I'll have a conversation with women where I'm actually listening, and I'm interested, but I'd rather be somewhere else. But
and I think that's a lot of the time as well. Men check out sometimes in those conversations as well. Exactly that. And then you're right with when you're describing your relationship with your dad, is you will always have this conversation with or hear the story with men. It's like, I haven't seen this guy for 6 months, but when we got together, it was like we met yesterday. Yeah, that's how men kind of see the relationship. And men are really bad at calling other men and say, how are you doing? What's going on? But when we meet, as you're saying, you would make
my best friend. I don't call. It's like we text each other every now and then. We'll catch up every month or so. That's my best friend.
Exactly. And when you do catch up, you have an awesome time. You do whatever you're doing. But then it's usually around some activity. It's not just like let's go to the pub. Exactly. Let's go to the pub, have a pint and cry over something that happened. We don't.
Terminator got lowered into a bit of molten thing, and he died. I mean, that's you'll cry over that.
And we don't tend to dwell on things more because, at least I find, I obviously fallen into this trap where I'm being accused of something, and then I say, but you did this as well, and it was like, okay, when? I don't remember.
I mean, are you talking with
if something happens in a relationship?
Don't do that.
We do.
Very bad. And don't remind me.
Absolutely.
But is that part of that framework from we're talking about being manly, that it's sometimes you listen and just take it on the chin. It's especially if you're having that conversation with a partner, and certainly don't go, as you said, she's bringing up something and says you did, and then you go, well, you did this. That just
Yeah,
throws
exactly.
gasoline on the fire. And not only that, that's not listening either.
No, that doesn't help in any shape or form. And it comes back to, as we started out on this, it's about that active listening and reframing, and kind of, I think a lot of the times, and we just generally people are better at this, is to acknowledge that person, whatever that person is saying. Somebody has a rant, as you said, have that patience of having that rant go to whatever long the rant needs to be. You just need to take it on the chin. And then when she finishes, you need to acknowledge, okay, I understand X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. And you need to kind of reiterate what she just spent 30 minutes of screaming at you that you actually heard her. Because I think a lot of the time people get even more frustrated when they don't feel that you are, as you say, we check out kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it all comes back to the communication side of things. Is that you just need to make sure you are respectful, and I think that comes into being manly as well. In my opinion, it's about being a whole individual. Because I have this kind of saying, and saw it somewhere, but I really like it. Is that there can't be us without you. So if you do not work on yourself and understand your shortcomings and why you may be respond in certain ways, then you can't be a better person in it. Like if you're always falling into the same potholes and never understand why, it's nothing about the relation. It's not other people's fault. It's actually on you to recognize it in yourself. I think I find as well a lot of people that end up in arguments. There takes two to be in that argument. It's not like generally always. Yeah,
that's not always exact words my mum used. It takes two.
Yeah. And like when I my background, I actually have one long relationship and one semi-long, not long, but 6 years of developed marriage was ended in divorce. And I know it took both of us to get there.
Yeah.
You cannot look at it. It was all her fault, and because X, Y, Z, because she was la 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 la. No, it's because it has something to do with you. She didn't come to the realization of wanting to do whatever she did because she just and then you need to analyze it and then actually be a grown up about it. That actually take it on the chin and say, yeah, there must have been something that I did wrong as well to get down to this.
Do you think that's part of that framework for being manly, is this self-responsibility, taking responsibility for your part in what you do? Well, which is everything that you do.
Absolutely, 100%. Because if you do not own up to your own mistakes and understand your own reflection, and I think that's partly why men are struggling at the moment a little bit and finding alone. And I think it's actually been considerably increasing men's suicides in the last number of years because of loneliness, and they don't feel they fit into the society anymore. And I think it's because they have maybe gotten an upbringing that was very chauvinistic or very kind of not very healthy, and they just don't know how to break out of it. And then there was no communication because before probably the 80s, it was a very manly dominated world. There were women always the power wasn't coming through, and we were seeing the start of the women movement. But the perception was the man went out, provided, worked his ass off, came home, and the woman would have the meal on the table, and the kids would be looked after. And that was his job, and they worked hard, and there was actually no leeway in anything else. Because there was only one breadwinner. And if that wasn't, if you weren't healthy and stuff like that, and then your whole family kind of would suffer. And the man, I think, took on quite a burden there without actually knowing how to express it. And then when we grew up, that was our role model. Like there was when my dad, when I had my daughter, and was born in the 30s. Yeah. When I started kind of like my parenthood with my daughter, is that I would maybe go to him and allow him to babysit and stuff like that, and he was like commented at some point to me, I was never allowed to do this before.
Mm.
And I was just so shocked that he kind of wasn't involved in certain things because
Yeah.
it was just not expected.
Yeah.
And we have come so long way in a positive way in the equal rights and all that, and I think it's very good. And I think women have as much to contribute as men. And but we need to understand that there's two sides to the coin,
Mm.
and I think the traction is very important. That women, as they go into to their careers and stuff, I think it kind of applies to both. Is that you can't forget as well. You need to be a sexual person. You need still to be able to have the man treat you, have the man buy you flowers, and be thankful and let the man give you a compliment. Not always think there's a hidden agenda.
Yeah, I mean, from my speaking with the majority of women I've spoken to said they want that. They still want, they love it when a guy opens a door. They love, the flowers. They love those little considerations. And so, because that's where I'm just wondering where men have got lost. Is it a case of now we're just, rather than, do we need to take this step back and go, okay, there's what our role has changed. We're a bit unsure about that. And we just need to, step back a little bit, listen a little bit more, but still, still be a man. Still, it's not that we go to work and she stays home and does what she's told. It's this is who I am. Because you mentioned before, you said taking responsibility, but need to know yourself. And is it a case where the person, whatever that is, the framework becomes not, a man is, some macho guy that looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger and can, burst through stuff, but it's more about going, well, this is what's right for me, and being firm on that, rather than having a generalistic that everyone is the same, which is kind of boring anyway. When you look at it, if we were all the same, that'd be really, would you really want everyone walking around looking like a condom full of walnuts? I mean, it's just not, that's not how you'd want society to be. Oh, well, that's not how I'd want it to be anyway. And I love the diversity. It is a case where we just need to encourage men in this framework to say, hey, what is right for you? You need to work out what's right for you and then just be confident in that.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. This is what men are lacking at the moment. It's the sincerity of who they are in a positive, reassuring kind of society way. As in, there's nothing more annoying than somebody comes home and say, so, darling, should we go out for dinner? Sure. Where do you want to go? Anywhere you want to go. Where do you want to go? And you're not taking a stand in the conversation. Everybody hates this, and it's known fact. And I think it comes back to, as I mentioned before, you need to know yourself. And I think that is the failure in a lot of relationships today, because it's just so easy to get into a relationship. I'm not saying it's easy, but it could if you like swipe left all the time. Coffee dates is that you need to understand what is your core values that you want out of your life. Do you want to have kids? Do you want to have that white picket fence? Do you want to have that sports car? Do you want to focus on your career for the next 10 years and then have kids? Whatever that dynamic is that for me, you need to be up and honest about it up front. Because you don't want to be in a scenario of spending time with somebody. Oh, well, that ticks all my boxes, but it doesn't tick this. But these boxes are really important for me, but she doesn't tick them. But I'm still going to see if I can persuade it to change her mind. Because you can't, generally doesn't work if you persuade somebody to change their minds, and specifically around kids. And if you persuade somebody to have kids and they don't want to have kids, that at some point they will resent you for it. And I think, and as well, is just to be an active member in the relationship is so important. And it comes down to being able to do those communication, be able to listen and say, I feel these things here are not something I like in my relationship, and then talk about it. Because I think for us, it's about being that kind of a gentleman, like open the doors and all that kind of stuff, walk on the outside of the street when you're walking with the women and stuff like that. But at the same time, you need to have your own opinion, because it's not about, like, if the woman says, like, let's go out for dinner, and you say, okay, let's go out to dinner, and I want to go here, I want to eat this, and then the woman say, it's no, not so sure. Okay, then you say, okay, this is my opinion, and okay, then you can say, if you want to go there, no problem. It's okay to back down. I'm not saying you should hold fast to every opinion, but at least have opinion. Don't be the one that says whatever you like, dear, whatever you like, dear. I think that's what women hate the most, and that's why women always go for that roughneck in the romantic comedies, because they want somebody that actually, sometimes the women come home from a very hard, and it applies to men as well. Sometimes men want this as well. But women
most
generally
of the stuff actually applies to both genders, but yeah, we're dealing with
absolutely.
Yeah.
When you come home from a like very stressful job, and you just want to be taken care of, you want somebody to cook, you want somebody to pour you a glass of wine, rub your feet, whatever it is. Everybody wants this, but it has to be on both sides. It has to be, I do something with you, you do something with me. It can not always be just one-sided.
Yeah,
and I think that's very important. And I think as well for women out there is that they need to always remember as well that we are idolizing women, and we see women as goddesses, and they've lost that belief that we actually see them as a goddess. In a certain way, they've given up quite a lot of power without them actually realizing it. With the women movement, is that they're giving up the powers that we as men have always seen them as a goddesses, always idolized them, always want like what we can almost say. There's no war in the world that has not started over a woman. There's always been a woman. And I think women need to understand as well. Men idolize women.
Yeah,
they adore women.
And do you think it's? I mean, from that perspective, it's okay when we're talking about what is manly for men to recognize that and go, "Hey, I think you're amazing," and we.
Absolutely.
I mean, to recognize that that's okay to think that, rather than be shy about, because we come back to this part about needing to be honest up front, and I love that statement that you've said, because all too often you start in a relationship and you're trying to put on this best front because you want to be liked, and and I've done that in the past where I've actually become a person that I didn't want to, that I didn't like. To try and it was a longer term relationship, and I changed so much to try and keep the other person happy. Whereas being up front would have been okay. And I've done that later in life where I like giving flowers, and the person I was dating didn't like flowers, and I went, this is not something I want to be in, and that was the reason for not seeing that person anymore. It was purely that she. I gave her flowers once, and she didn't. She goes, I really don't like flowers. I don't like it because it was something along the lines of killing something, and and which is fine. Everyone has their own opinion, but I looked at it and went, okay. To me, I like doing that kind of thing. I like making the other person feel special through this. I might not do it every day, but it's something that was important to me, and I just went, no, not even going to worry about it. This part about how does a person find that? Do you think? How do they find what's right for them?
That's what they need to that's through self-reflection. They need to understand, and as well, they don't. I think that's the problem with a little bit what men are lost at the moment is they don't feel they have the right to have opinion. They feel that the women are now in control and they need to be submissive, and then like yes dear, whatever you want. Like, because some men will fall into the trap because that if they don't, they feel they will have an argument and it goes down the rabbit hole, and just the women the evening is ruined. So they opt out for the lazy way of not having opinion and not having a conversation. Because they think that's just the easier way, but in the end of the day, they're actually not doing themselves any favor. So I think for that is really important that you show up as the person that you want to be.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, there will be time later down the line you waste all this time and effort and energy into something, and you will explode. You will say, "This is not something I wanted."
Yeah.
It will fail. Either you just need to be upfront about it in the beginning, because I find, and I'd say the same to women, because like a lot of, I think it's more difficult for women at the moment because that's just hard to find sometimes men that like they actually are contributing and are actually there for positive reasons, that there's a more game on their side. But thing is, just be upfront and honest, straight off. Like, if you want kids, just tell them straight off. I want kids. I want the picket fence. I want X, Y, and Z. Okay, then you know this guy is not going to play around with you for 6 months and say, no, I'm not for the kids, and you've wasted 6 months.
Yeah.
Better just be upfront and honest about it in the beginning, what you want out of it. And that's the same for men. And I think for men, and I know, like with like self-reflection, that space is much more dominated for women, because women are much more into the self-help and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And men need to get there. Men need to have that safe space that they can have that conversation about, I'm struggling, I'm depressed, I have this body issues or whatever it is, and talk to somebody that they feel secure about. And that's why, as I mentioned earlier, that there's a lot of these new support groups popping up, and it's very healthy, because generally when you're in the locker room or like now it's coming more and more, and it's actually a very positive thing. Like, men in sport, like they are homosexuals in those sports, but they're so afraid of coming out because the talk in the locker room is all about whatever sexual thing that you did, whatever, because they're trying to be manly. And it's very intimidating. And if you're not in that headspace, it's just very, very intimidating. And so it's very important that for an individual, anybody that is, that they actually know themselves and are not afraid of standing up for what they believe in. Is that they can say, I want to have the kids, I want to have the X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And be an active member of, just be in a communication and have opinion. I think that is probably the strongest thing I would put to anybody. Make sure you have opinion on everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, I don't know if I've had opinion on everything, but certainly stuff in my area I've have an opinion on. And I think I completely agree with you. And I'm just wondering, how do we encourage people? How do we encourage men to do that? To say, hey, this is right for me, like you said. You know, especially when you look at the diversity in the world. I have so many gay friends there, and they're wonderful, but we don't even talk about it from the perspective of, you know, whether they're gay or not. It's not even part of the conversation, because it's just they're people. That's my approach.
Exactly.
And it's you know, and the fact that I'm the weird guy that's straight is like, you know, it's like, and that must be, it's just not relevant to the conversations that we have.
No.
And but is it, you know, from that perspective, is it, how do you think a person who's unsure about that, is it a case of going, well, if the people that you're around aren't supportive, find new people to be around? Is that the case? I know most of the people I grew up with, I don't associate with.
I think it's a little bit like that. Is that you need to as well recognize the toxicity around you, like, and what the groups are that you're on, what you associate them with, and what you do with. Because I think at the end of the day, it comes out of the self-reflection. And I think with a lot of these things, you need to, it's like with anything, it's like if you want to quit smoking, you lose weight and stuff. You can't tell somebody to lose weight or stop smoking. They have to find it in themselves.
It's taken me a long time to learn that you can't do that. I've spent so many years and so much frustration trying to help people, and I finally get it in AA and all those kind of things, where it's like you're not there to help them; they've got to come to that conclusion themselves. And it's
exactly, you can be their support and have their ear and stuff like that, and support them, but you can't do it for them. And I think a lot of these things is, if a man wants to be better, he needs to be doing it for himself, not for the woman he is with.
Yeah. Do we need more? Is it more role models that we need, where people can look at that and say, hey, this is how a role model is? I mean, I look at it, because we talk about manly and the masculine, the macho type thing. I heard the best definition of what's really a real macho guy is a guy that's had a vasectomy and then jogs home. That's macho.
Okay, I wouldn't take it that far.
But... So that's really tough,
Yeah.
But from that perspective, do we need to have? Because I look at it, and I found it really confusing, because from my world, I was in the army. I was in the Australian Special Forces. I was posted to the SAS. And all the guys there, these guys were tough, obviously. They were the best of the best in the Special Forces. But in real life, if you didn't know they were posted there and you met them on the street, you wouldn't know. They just had a confidence in themselves that they knew they could do what they did. They didn't need to prove it to anybody because they knew they could be, they could deal with a situation that they had to deal with. So is it more that kind of role modeling that we need and saying, hey, toughness isn't about oppressing someone. It's this inner confidence.
I think that's really important. There's a very fine line here.
Yeah.
About pressing somebody and having your own opinion. Like I mentioned earlier, you should have opinion on everything. What I meant by that was, if somebody asks you, and then you say something about it, but you're willing to listen to other people's view on it. It's not like your opinion is the Holy Grail, and you will fight it to death.
Well, that's narcissism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to have opinion on it, and then listen to other person's views and understand. Like why would we want to this? Like as we were talking about earlier, let the woman talk out, rephrase what she just had told you, and then explain to her your side of things. I think that's very important. But like when you mentioned the SAS, though, is that they were trained into it. They were trained to be very good at their craft, and they were beaten into them on a daily basis. You are the best. You are the best. And that's kind of what self-reflection is about understanding your limits and then pushing those limits. And that's what SAS training, as far as I know, I've not been there, and I'm very impressed with those guys that do this, and anybody in Special Forces. But the thing with that is, you are being trained into it. You are given guidance on how to be like that. That's where we're missing from a lot of people want to improve themselves. They are not being trained. Like the simple things of what is active listening. If you would do a survey on the street, I would bet you we would only, and I'm giving it really good numbers here, we would maybe get 30-40% of people able to tell you what active listening means.
Well, most of the time, and I know I'm very guilty of that. When I was younger, was someone be talking to me, and I'm just thinking about what I'm going to say next, not really listening at all.
Exactly.
And it was only later in life that I learned, and started to listen. And even this year, I made it. That was my only New Year's resolution, was to listen more. It was
because we all do this. Somebody starts to say something, and there's and you got the solution almost straight away, right? I want to tell him now. I want to tell him now before I forget. And then you listen.
Exactly.
What was the solution? I forgot. Damn it! and we all have that fear. And the other thing as well, the other obviously tendency we have, and this is another very bad tendency, is that we want other people to validate us. Right? So when somebody start, especially with parents, they start to describe how great Johnny was at the playground today. He did X, Y, and Z. And then you want to just jump in and say, my kid did that as well. They were so very good. Because it's always that validation that your kid is as good as the other kid, kind of thing. Yeah. And I think that's just human nature, that we don't want to be any less than anybody else. And sometimes that's what active listening is about. It's actually not about you at that particular moment. Okay, you can, if you feel this right, it's not about the competition of saying, I did that too, or my kid did that too. Yeah. And I think we fall into that trap so often, specifically men. And it comes because we are vulnerable and we are insecure, and that's part of that we're not comfortable with ourselves, because we need that validation from the other person saying, "Oh, really? Okay, that's cool." Because we think.
Keep going.
Yeah? No, because we think we need that validation for that person, because we respect them so much, we want them to know we did the same.
Yeah.
Because it's underneath, we are really insecure and want that validation from whoever that is.
That's interesting, because that validation point, because we're insecure, which I'm linking that back to what we're, the guys that I was in the SAS with. And that's the point that I was getting to. They were so confident in their own ability, in their own self, they didn't need to be proving it to anyone. because they knew in themselves. They didn't need to go out into the world and walk around being the tough guys. And a lot of times, and a lot of these guys, one of the most deadly guys on the base, his hobby was sewing. He took my pants in, that was his hobby. And so you wouldn't, when you look at this guy, you wouldn't know that he was dangerous. He didn't have to project that because he didn't need to. He had that confidence. But I love that connection that you made, that we need to validate ourselves because we feel insecure. But if you feel secure in yourself, then and I'm just looking at that from the framework of being manly. I mean, how does someone get that security in themselves?
I think one of it is one of my favorite sayings. You have to fake it till you make it. Because if you don't feel and you cannot act like that, if you always act as the underdog and you're always saying, "Oh, this is always happening to me," and always have this bad luck, blah blah, then you will constantly have bad luck.
Yeah,
you have to talk positive about yourself. I think it's one of the best thing anybody can teach you. If you talk well about yourself, because you are going to be your worst enemy. It's just known fact, right? Because you are going to make all those castles in the sky about X, Y, and Z, and like what man has not gone up to a girl in a bar saying, "Hey, how are you doing?" Say, "Get away, you're ugly," or whatever she says. And it's generally all the time, it's not about you.
No.
It may be she's just in a very bad situation. Her boyfriend broke up, or she got a bad text, or whatever it is. It's generally not about you. So don't take it personally, and just say it wasn't the right moment. Or this wasn't the right goal for me, and make it a positive. Spin it in a positive way, because you are always going to be your worst enemy. You are only in those silent moments. You are going to sleep or whatever it is. You will play that scenario over and over and over in your head. Find any positive, silver lining in that conversation. Saying, okay, this was okay, I at least went over there and said hi. Yeah. At least went there, and at least she spoke to me instead of just shaking her head or whatever. Take those little nuggets and make those the big things, not about. And it's like a lot of these things as well that people talk about. You have to be comfortable with failing, and that is very important. That especially when you go out dating and you see guys that can go up to girls and they will hit on maybe 100 girls in one night, and you think, how can they do? They must be a player or whatever it is, and they just comes natural to them, and it's not because they're thick skin or anything. They just don't take it personally.
Yeah,
and then they're keeping it going. I'm not saying you should be that's the role models, but it's about not be afraid of failing, because I always find, and then it's the hardest thing, the hardest lesson I've learned is I always learn best if I fail. It sits with me, but what I do, with my marriage, when it failed, I was devastated. But the pole that I decided to take out of it was, what can I learn from it? How can I be a better person out of it? What was my mistakes in that relationship that I need to fix?
Yeah,
I wasn't dwelling on what my ex did, X, Y, and Z, because it's not healthy, and I don't know her side of the story. And if you would have my ex on this call, she would probably tell all the things that went wrong from her side that I didn't really realize or know about. And it comes back to the other thing, as we were saying before, men are usually clueless.
Yeah.
And we do not live in the women's head. So communication from the women is really important as well. Like when this the kind of ideal sketch in a comedy, a man is watching his favorite sports on the television, and the wife decides to clean the room. She starts to vacuum around him, and the reason for it is that she wants him to help her.
Yes.
And if you would just say to her,
just sit there and watch TV.
Let me finish watching the game, and I will do X, Y, and Z as soon as it's finished. Yeah. But then again, you have to then follow up and do X, Y, and Z when it's finished. You cannot just, because that's the other frustration thing is, if you promise something, you have to deliver. And that's, I think, is another thing about the manly thing is you have to have a follow through. You need to have opinion on things that people ask you about stuff. If you don't have opinion, you say, okay, I don't really have opinion on this. What you take on it? And the other thing is, when you promise something, you need to deliver.
Yeah.
Because that is to be a gentleman and a kind of use this like a high value man, is that people need to know that you're dependable.
Yeah, I like that from a framework perspective. I love that analogy that you talk about there. That's so great. It's because it links back to you having an opinion of what's right for you. You're watching the game. It's like, well, the game's live. I want to watch the game. You want me to do this? That's fine. I will do it after the game or do it later tonight or whenever. But you're interacting and saying, this is what's important to me. I want to watch the game. And then I'll go and do these things that you want me to do. Give me a couple of extra things to do. I'll do them too, and then I'll come and make love to you. How about that? Does that work?
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Because I think as well, this is one of the biggest failures that women do in relationships. Is men are very focused on one thing at a time. It's just how we get it. It's like comes back from when we were hunters. We just focused on killing that one animal.
Yeah.
And we were very focused. We had to have the patience to stalk it and kill it, and it was just very, very, very one-dimensional.
Yeah.
Women, on the other hand, had multiple things to juggle: the family, gathering, cooking, all that other things.
Yeah.
But men were always very focused, and that's more from a DNA standpoint. We were just very focused on one thing at a time. So when a woman comes in and into a room, let's say I'm watching a game, and she starts talking to me like about this, and I'm acknowledging her, but I'm not hearing her.
Yeah.
And I think with women, they need to pick a moment when we are actually focused on what the communication is about. Like that, coming in and walking the floor, come to me and say, "Hey, darling, I'm watching the game. And say, can I get your attention for 2 minutes?" And then talk to me for those 2 minutes to let me know, or whatever. Yeah, and let me know.
Talk to me now, in the ad break.
Yeah, like come to me and say, "I need to talk to you. Can you give me undivided attention for 1 minute?" If I say no, I'm just in this middle of, maybe I'm like now, like a lot of people work from home, right? That makes it even more difficult. Like you are middle of writing an email or proposal or whatever you're doing, or talking to somebody, and somebody comes in and just expects you to drop everything. It is, for us, it's very difficult for men because we need to focus on one thing at a time. So more come in and set the scene and say, "Darling, I need your attention. Can you give me 5 minutes? If not, when would be a good time for us to do X, Y, and Z?"
Yeah.
Or say to him, "Can you when is the time for you can do the laundry or take out the rubbish or do the cooking?" And then when you give your promises, you as a man need to deliver on those promises.
Yeah. Yeah, I have that. I mean, from that perspective, I look at it, it's about stating what's right for you. I have that with my son, where sometimes I'll be doing something and he'll come up to me and want something. And I'll say, "Hey, I'm doing this. I'll finish this, and then I'll come and see you and we can deal with that." Depending on what it is. Sometimes I'll deal with it straight away, but it's about coming back to what you were saying before. And I love that quote. It's really important to show up and be the person that you want to be. I love that quote. Every episode of these has a quote, and I think that's the quote for this episode. It's just so powerful. You need to show up being the person you want to be, and part of that is saying, "Hey, look, I mean, if you're a huge in your vernacular, it's football. We just call it soccer. But if you're a huge fan and it's an important game, it's like you let that know. This is who I am in that moment. That's what I need to do. Maybe in the ad break, come and talk to me. But as soon as it starts again, my focus is going to be here. We'll go out for a romantic dinner later, or we've done it the week before, or whatever it is. You've obviously got, in a relationship, you've got to manage that. But you're showing up being the person you are from the beginning. I love that statement about being confident in that.
Because that's the thing. That's again about the communication. And that comes down to is at this moment between when the soccer is on from 3 to 5.
You call it football. It's okay.
Okay, football doesn't matter. I'm gonna be busy here.
Yeah.
If you want me to do something, let me know what it is, and I will do it after. But then this is a really important aspect of this.
Yeah.
You then need to do it.
Yeah.
After that time that you gave your permission, your promise, because like if you keep not doing it and you're breaking your promise, she won't believe you and she won't give you that space.
Yeah,
because it's a mutual respect that you need to show your partner that if I promise you something, I will deliver. Okay, the occasion that like something comes up, but then set the expectation. Say, unfortunately, this came up. I will do it, and you need to then show up. And that's the thing is, you need to show up and deliver on your promise.
Yeah. And do you think because I love that framework around, being who you are and knowing who you are. And then if we take that a step further in finding that, because I look at, for example, my dad worked in the same organization his entire career, different jobs, but same organization.
Yeah.
And I look at that, and for a lot of people, they were in that situation where they were kind of told what to do, and they followed what was there. Now, as we've moved forward in time from that period, now people pretty much can do whatever they want. You can go out there. You don't have to do what your parents said. A lot of people have got that experience. They know that you don't have to be in the same job for the rest of your life. That's also changed. Do you think men have lost or we never had that ability to really choose what was right for us, and because we just did what was expected? But now this is all opened up. We haven't actually learnt this skill of deciding what is right for us. Do you think that's?
I think that's a really big point, actually, because there's too many options at the moment, and it's a good thing and a bad thing. And I think it comes down to knowing yourself and be ruthless about what I actually want to do. What is my strengths? What do I want to focus on? Do I want to be? Am I happy just being a store clerk and just having no stress and just being there and finish my job at whatever time it is, and I don't take it home with me?
Yeah.
Or do I want to be the ambitious person that works 24/7 and is always on and want to be in sales, or want to be in IT, or want to be a doctor, whatever it is? Because a lot of people, I think as well, what I struggled with a little bit is that I never had like a really dying career aspirations. I wanted to just do well in my job, and I fell into the jobs I actually enjoyed and I'm actually very good at. But it wasn't like a aspiration of I wanted to be a doctor, and I've just had a dying focus of wanting to be a doctor, and that's okay. I think a lot of times, and then just focus on what you want to be doing, and what kind of gives you enjoyment, and the money is always good and all that, and it comes down to you want to be able to feed your family, you want to give them all the best that you can, but sometimes as well you need to kind of maybe be a little ruthless of, is this not
everybody
good for
wants
my
that
health?
too, especially when you're in a relationship. Not, I would say majority of women don't want the guy that's going to be that driven, because when you're that driven, there's not a lot of time to have relationship time. That's because it requires that much effort. And is that the case of making people aware? So we're getting off that topic of being able to make your own decisions, but again, is that coming back to going, hey, this is what's right for me, and recognizing that's okay? Because especially if we're talking about relationships, there's what is it, 7.5 billion people on the planet. Half of them are women. If you're a guy, there's a good chance you're able to find someone that
To be honest, it's easier for men to find a woman than the other way around, as far as I understand.
Yeah,
because actually I think there are more women than men, actually.
Yeah, well, technically, I was just rounding it.
Yeah. I think I think that applies. You actually need to know yourself. I think that's the main thing. I mean, a lot of us, especially men, will end up in there's expectation to go into the family business, whatever that is. I'm a doctor or lawyer or whatever it is, and there's an expectation. But maybe that's not what you want to do, and you need to be kind of brave enough to say, hold up your hand and say, I'm going to look at this. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Let me try it out, or try how it fits. And I think we as a society don't do enough of that. Just do that self-reflection, and I think that's a little bit what we lost, and then now you see much more with this. What we lost a little bit with all the television, and all the computers, and all the gamings, and all the mobile phones, and all the Instagrams, and all the social media, is that we have lost the ability to sit in quiet and reflect, and just be comfortable with the silence. And I think that is one of the reasons men are struggling today. And I think it's across the board, the increase in suicides, is that we always think there should always be something on. And we struggle when we just sit in a room that's quiet and we have to listen to our mind. I think that's one thing. We need to start focusing more on just our own self-preservation of kind of mental attitudes and meditations and things. I think meditation is really, really important, because I think we lost that ability, especially in the last 40 years, 50 years. Since television and a little bit like newspapers and those things come on, because they're filling the dead space. That people were just sitting and reflecting and thinking about something, or thinking something through. And if you compare it to the evolution of man, I mean, we had much more evolution in like new inventions and stuff like that 100 years ago than we do, but we're getting a lot of invention now because we have computers doing all the thinking for us.
Yeah.
So we have a tool now that helps us with a lot of these things that we used to do ourselves by self-reflection. And I think that is one of the things that we need to be very cognizant about, that we need to be comfortable with ourselves. We need to be comfortable just being on our own as well. I think that is very important.
I think that's really important. As you're saying, you need to be comfortable with yourself. I want to come back to what you mentioned before, because we didn't quite explore it fully, was you mentioned about this fake it till you make it. And what I wanted to touch on that there is, because a lot of people, from what I've experienced, don't realize that a belief is not real. It's just a thought that you've repeated over and over again. And this fake it till you make it, is that, I mean, because I know from my own experience, I mean, there was a period when I was younger that I didn't quite like myself. And well, not quite, I just didn't, there was a part of me that didn't like myself.
Yeah.
And I just repeated over and over again that I like myself. Which felt uncomfortable to start with. But now, it's a, I'm just going to say it was a rare day, but I can't think of a day where I didn't wake up and think I'm freaking awesome. And that's how I think about myself. And not from that perspective of I walk around everyone, hey, I'm freaking, I do sometimes, but most of the time.
I do too.
But I mean, it's from that, but it's coming back to what I was, with the guys that I knew in the SAS. It's a confidence. I have a confidence in myself. I like myself, and I know, and I had a mentor, he was the former managing director and chairman of BP. And I remember one time, I used to ask him for advice every now and then, and it was usually via text message. And he would, and I know, but I'm pretty confident he deliberately didn't respond till like 3 or 4 days later to make sure that I thought about it first before he gave me an answer. But I had something come up urgently, and I was worried about it. And I messaged him and said, I'm worried about this. And his response, he responded straight away, which was surprising. But because I wasn't expecting it, but his response was, Damien, I think you should back yourself that you'll make the right decision for you. And that was one of the most powerful pieces of advice that I've ever received, was just believe in yourself. And if you make a wrong decision, you can always make another one, and you can do something else.
Yeah, exactly.
It's rare that you make a decision that is not reversible. And even people, when you look at it, Tim Allen was one of my, he's one of my favorite comedians. He was in jail for 2 years for, drugs. You can always turn things around. So is it, when we talk about this and we're coming back to this whole belief thing, is it a case of just sharing that information? Hey, if you got a belief that doesn't work, you don't have to be attached to it. You can let it go. And it's not hard to change it. You just write it out, what you want it to be, and then just repeat it over and over again. Is it that simple?
I think so, because I think as well, we are very good at sabotaging ourselves. We are very good at when we think, because as I said, we are our worst enemies. And when we come to the glass ceiling, we're very good at knocking ourselves down and not going, having that upper limit, right?
Yeah.
And we will self-sabotage ourselves because we don't feel we're good enough. We don't feel we have the right skill set. We don't feel X, Y, and Z, whatever that is. And we will talk ourselves out of it. Or we will create a drama around it that will make sure we don't get that. I see that, and
I've never seen that before. I've never done that before. And bull, crap! I've done it many times in the past.
Exactly, and I think in any scenario, and you're right. What your mentor was saying is, it's better to make a decision than delay the decision. The longer you delay the decision, you have then more time of sabotaging yourself. Make a decision that feels right to you at that time. Okay, take some advice, and then make the decision yours.
Yeah.
And do not blame somebody else that gave you some advice and said, he told me to do it. No, he didn't tell you to do it. You, at the end of the day, are an individual with your own beliefs and your own decision making. It was your decision to do this in this way. And I find always one of the saddest thing I see in any person when they start blaming other people for their own misfortune. There's so many opportunities out there that you can do to improve yourself and do stuff for yourself, that you cannot blame other people for your misfortune. Because in the end of the day, okay, there is always exception, like with everything. But at the end of the day, as you mentioned, there's always a silver lining. There's always going to be another decision. There's always going to be a way out of it.
Yeah, the thing is too, if you blame someone else for that misfortune, you don't have any control to fix it. You're reliant on the other person or the circumstance, whatever it is. You're lacking control. But if you take control, take responsibility, and say, well, what did I contribute to this? You can find ways of doing things differently.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to that for me is you have to own your life. You need to understand who you are, what you want out of it, and then deliver on it. And I think that's the hardest thing is very few people do self-reflection to understand, why am I here? What do I want to get out of this? What are the relationships I want to be in? And a lot of the time, just people let life happen to themselves, and then they wake up in the 50s or 60s, 70s, and say, where my life gone? And I really hate this perception when people say you have one life and you should do whatever is best for you. It doesn't work always like that. If you have kids in the picture, you have to take in the picture your kids. You cannot be single-mindedly that selfish.
Yeah.
That when you know yourself, because you maybe have found yourself in a scenario that you didn't think that, and you got yourself to this situation. You cannot say, okay, I'm throw everything on the window. I'm gonna divorce my wife. I'm gonna leave my kids, and I'm gonna like shack up somewhere else. That is not being a responsible human being. It's about knowing what you need and then slowly work towards making it happen. Not just wake up one day and say, I have one life, let's throw everything out the window.
Yeah. Do you think it's a case when we talk about this and as an overarching part of this framework, and I love what you just said, there's a lot of things my pen's been going overdrive listening to you talk. There's so many great things here. But you said you have to own your own life. Is that a case? And we talked about social media and things like that. Is it a case when we're looking at this framework for being manly, is you have to own your own life, which means don't be influenced by what you might get on social media and things like that. And from my perspective, I've turned all that off. I don't get any notifications from any devices. It doesn't mean I don't have things, but I don't see it until I actively look at it. I don't have push notifications. I've turned it off because I want to be in control of my life, and also it's distracting and affects your time management as well. Whole nother topic. But from a perspective of, I have a program called Max Time, which is about that. One of the key things is turn those things off. It gives you so much more time in the day. But from that side of things, you say you have to own your own life. Is it a case of where, from that perspective is, have that courage to say, you can stop looking at what everyone else is doing and just you decide what's right for you and walk that path? Is that what people need to do? What guys need to do?
Absolutely. Or at least have the reflection on it is, okay, maybe I like that path. It's okay. Somebody laid out the path for me and have a think about it. Is it the right thing for me? Is it the strength that I feel? Is it giving me enjoyment? And it may be the right thing for you, but have that your own self-reflection of knowing you made a conscious decision of this is what I wanted. Because if you do not, then you find yourself 10 years later down a path that you didn't want to. It's your fault. It's actually not the person that drove you there. Because in the end of the day, you have the ability to say yes and no.
Yeah.
And you need to own up to your own decisions. And I think that is the most important thing here. Now, I'll stress these two things, is that you need to own your own decision and own opinions. And then you need to show up when you give your word. Because if you keep promising something and you always let people down, people will lose all respect for you.
Yeah.
And you will lose respect for yourself. And I know you will beat yourself up as well, because you know you didn't want to do it, and it wasn't your intention to let everybody down. And because you put yourself in such a bad frame of mind, it's just will affect everything around you.
Yeah. I love that. You need to own up to your own decisions, and you need to keep your word. I love that as a framework. All right, we've talked for a little bit on that. Is there something key things you'd like the audience to take away? How would you sum this up, this framework? Although we may have already done that with, you have to own up to your own decisions and you need to keep your word. That's a pretty good framework, I think, for being manly.
I think I think that we kind of covered it. I don't think there's much to add here. I think it's just, as I said, just show up who you are. Yeah. Be your authentic self. I think like a lot of people use that word, because if you don't know who you are, why can you expect somebody else to do that for you?
Yeah.
And don't blame other people for the environment you're in, because in the end of the day, okay, there's always the perception on this. The end of the day, though, is you are in control of yourself, and you have to own that, and stop blaming other people around you.
Yeah.
And if it's an environment that's really toxic for you, then try to find a way that you can get out of the toxic environment. There are a lot of support groups, a lot of people out there that can help in any shape or reach out to somebody that you just want to have somebody to talk to. And I know it's specifically difficult for men, and I found this group called the Mankind Project, and those kind of things. They're all about just kind of creating a positive environment for men to have those communications. And I know there's a lot of similar things for women. And it's just, I think a lot of the time it's just, make it about you a little bit. Don't be afraid to have opinion on what you like and what you don't like. And don't be like a bastard about it, as you were saying. Walk around like I'm the best person ever, and you should listen to me and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Find that balance of believing in yourself, have opinion on it, but listen to others' opinion as well. And I think that's really important.
I think that's important what you said there, because you can have an opinion, but you don't have to be a bastard about it. You can say, look, this is my opinion. And you don't have to have a debate about it. A debate is in my opinion, a debate actually means two narcissists together trying to beat the other one over the head. That's why I don't like debates, because no one's really listening. But it's really about, because you have the right, and we live in, well, for those of us that live in a free society that are listening to this, not everyone has that, but certainly, in the UK and Australia, we live in a free society where we are entitled to have our opinion, and we have that freedom of speech. So we can say, hey, this is what's important for me. Now, that's not forcing it. It's important for someone else. It's just saying, this is what's important for me. And if you want to walk this path with me, it's certainly in a relationship, it's very important to say, this is what's important for me. Because you want that person to know what's important for you. But you can do it nicely.
Exactly. And then express your opinion and say, okay, I'm willing to listen to your side of it. And can I explain me your view on this? And just have it open and kind of a passive conversation.
Well, it's how you approach that. I mean, and I have these little collection. I'm a pop culture guy, and I have a little collections of snippets from movies and TV shows and bits like that emphasize points for me. And one of the in my little collection, at the very front, it's about how do you go about things, and it's about being nice. And I take it from, there's a movie, the Roadhouse movie, which had Patrick Swayze in it, where he's a bouncer. And he gives that speech and says, be nice. And the other one that I've got in there is from Pretty Woman, where they had the dinner party, and the old guy comes up and goes, I'm going to tear you apart. And Richard Gere turns back and says, I look forward to it, sir. So
it's funny. It's funny you should bring up the Roadhouse one, because my friend of mine just brought that up this week or last weekend. And that speech of him when he's explaining the bouncer, because the bouncer ethic is actually very interesting. It's you need to be nice.
Yeah.
They scream at you, call you all they call you mother or whatever it is. Be nice. It's actually not about you. They are frustrated about something else. Don't make it about you.
Yeah.
When somebody does that, just pity them and say, "Oh," and be nice.
Yeah. You're having a bad day. It's not me.
Yeah,
You're having a bad day.
No.
It's like
yeah,
and
don't.
And that applies in real life. I mean, outside of just everyday conversation. If someone's upset, they're having a bad day, not you.
Yeah.
I love Wayne Dyer's I'm a big fan of Wayne Dyer, and he talked about it he used the analogy of playing a volleyball game. Someone can hit the volleyball to you and said, "Why didn't you turn up at this time?" And you can take it, smear it all over, and says, "I don't have to tell you what to do," or you can say, "Oh, you wanted me to turn up at this time." Put it back to them, and that whole approach of being nice makes a big difference. And I think that's really important from a framework from a manly perspective, and that's why we mentioned about role models before. We really didn't get into it too much, but I look at it and I think you see what you want to see, because when I look at a lot of movies and things like that, that's what I see. They see these role models of great, people, Roadhouse, be nice. The Pretty Woman, Richard Gere saying, the guy's telling he's going to tear him apart, and he's like, I look forward to it. Doesn't argue.
I find as well with a lot of these things. I always read quite a number of like self-help books and all that kind of thing. I think in a way the self-help books are good because it's like you mentioned, the role models.
Yeah.
You read somebody's autobiography and you get snippets from it, and I think a lot of these self-help books is for me is not all relevant, but there are these snippets in there, like the aha moments. It's like I knew that, but it puts it in the context for me. You know what I mean? It's like somebody explaining something to you that, okay, now it's like there's a lot of frameworks, like people respond differently because of X, Y, and Z. There's like the archetypes, there's the enneagrams and all that kind of thing, that kind of analyzing why you came to be like you are. And I think those kind of self-reflections are very important, that you can understand why I respond in a certain way. And when you know that is the first step of you being a better person. When you know that, I had a really bad argument with my wife because X, Y, and Z, that you can then honestly go to and say, I apologize because I behaved like that because I was doing X, Y, and Z. I think that is really important. That comes back to that self-reflection. If you don't do self-reflection to understanding why you're behaving in a certain way, you will never be able to understand or try to kind of improve it. But you're not going to fix it overnight, and you will have issues. And I know, like, I just recently got married again, and I know I can still catch myself in some certain things that I did wrong in my previous marriage. But now that I know, I'm more aware of it, and I can more say, "Hey, I'm sorry I did that because of this."
Yeah.
And my wife appreciates that, and she understands me better when I do that. And it has obviously some aspects of my behavior come obviously from my childhood and my upbringing that I have now. I'm projecting onto her because somehow it's deep in my subconscious that some things happen at two certain traits because I saw it in my parents, and knowing that helps me a lot to trying to improve those interactions with my own partner that I wouldn't have done before because I wouldn't realize I was doing it, if that makes sense.
100%. And because I've got some great friends in Canada, they wrote a book called The Unbreakable Marriage, and the book opens with, you don't have marriage problems, you have problems that yourself that you're bringing to the marriage. And it's really powerful in when you recognize your contribution to that. And I love that from the perspective of, when you're talking about a framework for being manly and this accountability, making yourself responsible, accepting your responsibility for the actions. As you said before, it takes two to tango. And I quote, because my mum said that, and I quote it as well. It's like it does, but it's so true. It takes two to tango. What is your part in this?
And I think it comes down as well, as we all know, like there is this dating period in any relationship. Everything is rosy for like the first 6-9 months or a year. But then the cracks start to come through. The cracks are usually your cracks that you bring with you into that relation from your upbringing, whatever it is. And you have to understand the partner on the other side is doing the same. And we are not going to be perfect. We're not going to be that perfect people that we did for the first 6 months. There are going to be behavioral issues in ourselves, our insecurities, or in vulnerabilities, because we will play our best version of ourselves for the first 6 months. Then we start to relax and say, this person will actually not dump me. I always remember the scene in Friends when Chandler and Monica started dating. If you remember Friends, and not everybody else.
I didn't watch Friends, so
I
know of it, but I never watched it.
You know, you can tell from what the age group I'm in. But anyway, they were starting dating. There were basically two characters in the show. Yeah, and they basically had been friends through like 3 or 4 years or 5 years, whatever it was, and then they start sleeping together. And the Chandler in this case was very insecure man and didn't look at himself very, very highly. And then they had a huge argument, and they everything blew up. And he stormed out the room, blah blah. Then he came, have settled down. So we've broken up, haven't we? So his perception was we had a huge argument, so we must have broken up. Yeah. And she was like, "What's wrong with you? We just had an argument." So it's kind of understanding that perception as you get through your relationships is when the guards are coming down, it's actually us then showing our true selves, and we have issues. Yeah. Everybody does. Yeah. And it's about then is an important part of it is you have to communicate and talk about it and be open about what those things are. And because what we're always afraid of is to show somebody our true self, because we are insecure, we are ashamed of ourselves for X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. I'm not saying you should bear all, because sometimes you have to have that mystic around it as well. But what is important, and at least just be, or you need to understand why certain behaviors are coming through for you. Yeah. And understand as well the person on the other table will have their own vulnerabilities as well, and they're not going to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. If you had a perfect 6 months, it's not the true self, because there are always going to be issues. There are always going to be breaks. Yeah,
no, very true. Well, we've covered so much. We've covered a lot. We've talked for a while. It's been fabulous. I took so many notes from this. So there's a lot of show notes to go together here. And Stefan, I love your take on this. That it's about your own self from perspective of being manly. Have this, as you said, you need to own your own decisions, and also you need to keep your word. I love that as a framework for being manly. That really covers it extremely well as an overarching set of principles. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts and wisdom.
It was my pleasure, Damien. I really, really appreciate you having me on, and hopefully it was useful and people can take some positive things out of this.
Thank you for being part of the Share.Care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes for others and for you.